Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. We're going to be concluding the book Head Girl of the Chalet School by Eleanor M. Brent Dreyer. Chapter 20, In the Caves. It was almost 8 o'clock when Cornelia reached the cleft of which Joe and Griselle had spoken. She recognized it at once, long and narrow, and almost under the mountain. She was hungry, so she sat down and ate one of the apples she had brought at a chalet on her way. Then, throwing away the core and cleansing her fingers by the simple method of licking them, she felt in her pocket to see that the 2 new batteries she had put there were all right, switched on her torch, and squeezed her way in. She found herself in a dark, narrow passage, which went on as far as she could see. Walking carefully, for she had no desire to tread on any snakes, and one might have made it home here. She went slowly along. Her torch cast its bright light on the ground in front. For a long way the passage went fairly straight, and then it suddenly took a sharp turn to the left, and she found that she was going downhill. It was quite dry underfoot, and as she went, the roof, which had been low at first, seemed to rise. There was no sound to be heard save the ring of her own feet on the hard ground, and many children would have been terrified. Not so Cornelia. She had made up her mind that she was going to discover those caves, and discover them she would. Of what danger might be ahead of her she never even thought. When she had been walking a long time, or so it seemed, she came to a kind of crossroads. This was the first check she had received, and she looked in dismay as she wondered which way she ought to take. She was tired now, for she had been up all night, and her legs were aching. With a little sigh she sank down on the ground and stared dismally round her. What should she do? As if in answer to her question, one of the apples in her coat pocket rolled out and trundled off on the path that led to the left, as if setting forth on a journey on its own account. "I'll go that way," declared Cornelia, getting on to her weary feet again. Of course, they said that the caves were probably under the lake, so this must be the path. But I wonder where the other goes. She stooped down, picked up the apple, which had come to rest against a hump in the ground, and walked on, munching as she went. She was dreadfully tired, and only her indomitable will kept her going. Suddenly she tripped up over an unexpected depression in the earth, and fell headlong. She was not hurt, but she felt that she simply could not drag herself on one step further. She must rest a little before she went on. She stretched herself out, sighed for very relief, and switched off her torch. The air was fairly fresh here, and she had sense enough to realize that she must not waste light. The thick darkness which descended on her dismayed her a little, but she argued that she didn't need a light to rest by. Then weariness did its work, and before she had grasped anything, she was asleep. For long hours she lay there, slumbering as peacefully as if she were in her own bed. She never heard light, stealthy steps coming along the passage, nor saw the flare of a rude torch of pine wood and resin. Neither did she feel herself lifted up in the strong arms and borne on steadily, while a cracked voice murmured exclamations of wonder over her. She had no knowledge of being carried for some 2 miles thus, and then being laid down on a heap of deerskins, while the strange being who had found her hung over her and talked to himself in strange gutturals. It was, in fact, nearly 5 o'clock when she awakened, and by that time the whole valley had been roused and was out searching for her. Dr. Jim had been summoned from the Sanoff, and had come down to hear that she had vanished. She had not gone downwards, for she had not been seen on any of the trains. Equally, no one had met her on the mountain path leading to the Sparts. The only clue they had to go on was that she had bought apples at one of the cottages on the way to the Lottbach. but that she had not gone on to the Great Tiern Pass was proved, for a party of German students came that way, and they all agreed that they had seen nothing of a little girl with her hair bobbed, a blue cotton frock, and a short brown coat. Can she have tried to go up to the Chernjok? Inquired Grizel to Joe. Goodness knows, was Joe's gloomy response. I don't think so, though. She's not keen on climbing, you know. The fuss she made about going up to the Barnbald Alp. Grizel flashed a quick glance at her. Dr. Jem won't tell Madame yet, Joey, she said. My goodness, I hope not, returned Joe vigorously. It would make her ill if she knew. Mademoiselle came up to them at this moment, a distraught mademoiselle, with her hair untidy and her face white. Come, you must come and eat. Going without food will help no one. The two turned and followed her in front of the garden where they had been talking. There was wisdom in her words, as they knew. They sat down at the table and ate their bread and butter and drank their milk in silence, which even the talkative Middles didn't break. Once towards the end of the meal, Marie turned to her next-door neighbor, Dira. It's almost as if the kobolds had carried her off, she said seriously. Ah, then, hold your tongue, will you? Said Dira in answer, and Marie obeyed. When they had finished, the girls wandered out again and roamed restlessly about the grounds. The younger Middles clustered together in the flower garden and tried to think of where Cornelia could have gone. The rest just mooned about, to quote Mary Burnett, and did nothing. The great fear in everyone's heart was that the child might have got herself into difficulties on one of the mountain slopes and might be laying even now hurt and helpless. Their main consolation was that she could not have fallen into the lake, since she had been going in the opposite direction. At 9 o'clock the Middles were sent to bed, and the seniors were made to follow at half-past. Only Grizel sat with the older girls, her face white with anxiety, while the staff still searched through the nearby pine woods, even Mademoiselle having gone with them. Herr von Gluck was with the 5 girls in the study, having just come back from a fruitless hunt through the woods across the little stream. He was tired and hungry, and Grizel had gone to the kitchen to get Louise to bring café and some buttered rolls for him. She had just returned with her laden tray when there came the sound of bare feet running down the stairs, and then Joey, clad only in her pajamas and with her hair standing on end, burst into the room. She paid no heed to anyone but Grizel, on whom she flung herself. Grizel, I believe I know where she's gone. It's the cave. Don't you remember all the questions she asked about them? Well, I believe she's gone off to try to find them on her own. Come on, I'm going to fetch her out. Oh, no, Joey. It was Gisela who spoke up, springing to her feet and nervously overturning the tray the captain now held. You must not. Think of what Madame would say. I'm going, repeated Joe, her jaw set square. I'm thinking of Madame. If she knew about this, it would be enough to make her very ill. Grizel and I are the only two who know exactly where the entrance is, and if we go, we can get there without wasting any time. She must be brought back before Madge has to hear about it, and I'm going. Herr von Gluck set down the tray and spoke with determination. I will come with you, Fräulein Joey. What you say is right. Listen, Wanda. He turned to his betrothed. I will take Fräulein Joey and Fräulein Grizel with me now, and we will set off at once. You must tell the others and bid them to follow us. We will take string so that we may leave a guiding cord for them to follow, and so that we may not lose our way when we are returning. Fräulein Joey, go and dress at once, and you put on thick socks. You also, Fräulein Grizel. Fräulein Marini? He turned to Gisela. You must find me some brandy. We may need it. The girls hurried off to do his bidding, and an hour later found the 3 who formed the vanguard of this wild expedition creeping along the mountain hunting for the cleft. Could poor terrified Cornelia have known how near they were, things would have been better. Unfortunately, she had no idea that help was coming, and it seemed to her as if she was alone, abandoned to the tender mercies of a maniac. When she had awakened, shortly after 5 in the afternoon, it had been to find herself in a gigantic hollow place full of pillars that glittered in the light cast by rude torches, which someone had lit in places in holes here and there. The shape was nearly circular, and for a moment Cornelia lay and wondered if she were dreaming. She seemed to have got into some fairy's palace. Then there was a movement near her, and looking round, she repressed a scream with difficulty, for coming toward her was the man she recognized as being the lunatic of Grizel and Joey's story of the robin's rescue. He came softly, smiling at her, and with a strange light in his crazy blue eyes which scared her. "The gracious lady has slept long?" he said in his soft, mumbling pathos. "Almost I thought her under a spell, and would not open her eyes for a century. What does the gracious lady will that I, her servant, shall do for her?" With a mighty effort, Cornelia pulled herself together and stood up. "Take me back," she said. He shook his head with a cunning smile. "Nay, gracious lady, that may not be. They who come here are prisoners of the kobolds, and the other fairy folk anything but that." He had raised his voice as he spoke, and it boomed through the great pillared cave, echoing and re-echoing weirdly along the pillars. He came nearer as he spoke, and stretched out his hand to her. Cornelia shrank back against the pillar under which she had been laying. In her movement, she tipped over the deerskin which had formed her bed, and reeled, and would have fallen had not the maniac caught her, and set her gently on her feet again. "The gracious lady must be careful," he said reproachfully. "You shiver, my little princess. Are you cold? Permit that I wrap this round you." He picked up one of the skins and drew it round her, and then stooped. He picked her up and carried her to the other side of the palace, where 2 pillars rose on each side of the mound, forming a kind of fantastic throne on which he placed her. How it was Cornelia managed to keep her senses was something no one was able to understand. Joe declared after it was all over that she would have died if it had been she. However, she did keep them, and when he brought some bread and a handful of berries, she even managed to control herself sufficiently to take them and eat them. He brought her a wooden cup full of water, and she drank it thankfully, and when her meal was over she felt better, and rose from her seat, anxious to explore. She had been right in coming here, so far as the caves were concerned. She recognized that. Margia had been quite correct when she had guessed the cleft to be the entrance. Cornelia looked round her in wonder at the white, gleaming walls. What could it be? She thought it looked like diamonds. Wondering, she scraped her fingers over the nearest pillar, and then took it to her lip. Salt. It was salt. She knew of the great salt mines of the Salzburg district at Hall, nearer to Innsbruck. It was evident that this was a kind of a offshoot from them, and if this was so, then these caves would be of even more value to the people than Joey had imagined. She wondered where her strange host was and glanced around. He had stolen on noiselessly to a nearby pillar and was standing there, watching her with childlike smile and benevolence. "I wish to go farther," she said in halting German, forcing her lips to utter the words. He shook his head. "But no, gracious lady, that may not be. This is your home, little princess, and here you must dwell till the queen comes to you. But have no fear. I, Sigmund Arnulfi, will guard you and keep all harm from you. Does the gracious lady will that I sing to her?" Terrified lest she should rouse his temper, Cornelia agreed, and the strange creature took her hand in a claw-like grasp and led her back to the throne, on which he seated her, and then from some niche he took out a zither, and running his fingers across the strings, sounded a shower of silvery notes, which the echo took up, returning to them an elfin chorus of beauty, which would have enchanted the child had she heard it under different circumstances. As it was, she had to clench her hands and set her teeth to keep herself from springing up and screaming. The old man paid her no heed. He lifted up his voice and howled. No other word would describe the sound he made. A song about a beautiful lady and her true knight up to the vaulted roof. It was terrible, and the mocking echoes made it even worse. When he had finished it, he started another, and he went on singing or howling for nearly 2 hours. After that, he advanced once more to the throne, picked up the girl, and carried her over to the heap of deerskin on which she had awakened, and laid her down. My little princess looks weary and must sleep, he said, covering her over very gently. But there was a strength in his hands which terrified the girl's sense rather than felt. She dared not dispute them. She lay submissively still, and when he had attended to the torches and replaced with fresh ones those which were flickering to their death, he went and laid himself down before the opening which she rightly guessed to be the entrance to the passage. He was asleep in a minute, and his snores resounded through the cave. Cornelia waited into half an hour, and then got up cautiously, slipped off her shoes, and carrying them in her hands, went towards another opening she had noticed when she had been wandering around the cave before. She had just reached it when she suddenly heard a wild yell of rage, and looking back she saw him leaping across the floor to her. With a scream of uncontrollable terror, she rushed through the entrance and made off down a path which felt damp to her feet. She tore on, expecting every minute to feel his claw-like grasp on her shoulder. Suddenly she crashed into something with stunning force. A blaze of stars followed, and then thick darkness, and she knew no more. Chapter 21, Rescue. How long she lay there unconscious, Cornelia never knew. She came to herself with a splitting headache, to find that she was very damp and in a thick darkness that frightened her. She tried to get up, but her legs gave way under her, and her head throbbed so sickeningly that she was thankful to lie back down. She wondered half-dazedly how long she would have to lay there before help came. She never doubted but that help would come, sooner or later. She guessed that the school would be frantic about her being lost, and she had a hazy recollection of the fact that Rufus had helped track the robin. He would help find her, and then she would be taken back to the Chalet school. Once there, she would honestly behave herself and be as good as she knew how. I'd just despise to be anything else, she thought. Oh, I wish my head would stop aching for a bit. How cold and damp it is. There must be a fog. By this time she was half delirious and had no idea what she was talking about. It had never crossed her mind to wonder why Herr Arnolfi hadn't come to her. She had forgotten all about him. By and by she fell into an uneasy slumber, in which she tossed and moaned, talking at intervals in rapid undertones. It was a mercy for her that help was very near. At that moment, when she had been making an effort to escape, Grizel, Joey, and Friedel von Gluck was entering the cleft in the mountainside, and the young man was fastening one end of the first of the enormous balls of string which they had brought to a bush just outside. All three had torches, and all three had spare batteries with them. Friedel carried a tiny flask of brandy in one pocket and one bandage in the other, though the girls knew nothing of these. Time enough to tell them when they were needed, he thought. Joey had stuffed her pockets full of ripe gooseberries, which she had snatched from a dish in the spisal, and Grizel had grabbed up some of the butterbrode which Friedel had left from his hasty meal. It was an easy journey till they came to the crossroads, But there they paused. Which way would the girl have taken? The two guides hunted round for some sign, and Grizel uttered a sigh of relief when she found a small piece of apple. Uttered a sigh of relief when she found a small piece of apple peeling, which Cornelia had dropped as she walked. There it is. This is the way she had gone, she cried. Friedel von Gluck was at her side at once. You will pardon that I lead the way? It is necessary. Grizel stared at him, but she squeezed herself against the wall and let him pass her. And then it struck her that he feared lest the lunatic might be in there with Cornelia, and recognized her as the savior of the robin. Meekly she followed him, insisting on Joe keep behind her. It's horribly dark, said the latter impressionable young lady, with a shudder. Don't get too far ahead, Grizel. All right, Joey, replied Grizel gently. Grab my coat, and we'll keep together. At this point, the young captain stopped and demanded another ball of string. Grizel produced it, and rapidly knotted the two ends together with a reef knot, and then they went on. We're going downhill, said Joey in a low tone presently. I know, murmured the head girl in reply. I'm certain now that Margia was right, that this is the way to the caves. I only hope we've enough string to last us. Pardon that I ask that you do not talk, said the leader, stopping and turning round. We cannot know how sound will carry in this place. There was a common sense in what he said, and they were silent as they went on. Presently they came to the place where Cornelia had lain down to rest, and here they had proof of the fact that she was there, for on the ground was her torch, just as it had fallen from her relaxed grip when she had gone to sleep. Friedel von Gluck picked it up and examined it. Her name was on a narrow band of silver right round it, so there was no doubt. Thank goodness, thought Grizel. But what a little silly. The path had been going downhill for some time, but now they found that it took a sharp turn upwards and went out at a fairly steep gradient. Both girls were tired, and the young captain was weary too, for he had been out nearly all day hunting for the missing child. Their progress was slow, and Grizel, glancing round, was horrified at Joe's white face. They did not dare to pause, however. None of them could help thinking of the maniac who had tried to kidnap the robin so few short months ago. Suddenly, Herr von Gluck gave vent to a low exclamation and stopped. The girls stopped too, and crowded up to him. There is a light ahead, he said, pointing. They looked. Yes, it was true. A faint glow straight ahead of them told them that the first part of their journey was at an end. Rapidly the captain gave them their orders. They were to follow him till he said stop, and then they were to stay where they were till they heard him call come. If he said run, they were to turn and run as quickly as they could till they came to the crossroads. There they were to turn to the right, extinguishing their torches, and go the little way down. If he did not come soon after that, they were to listen for sounds, and if all was quiet, to go back and follow the string till they got outside, where they were to go straight back to meet the search party he felt sure would be hastening after them even now, and warn them that there was danger from the madman. He made them repeat his orders, and then led them on for another 10 minutes. And then, short and sharp, came the order to stop. They stopped instantly, and he went on, while they crouched down by the wall and fearful of some unseen danger. Jo was praying to herself very softly, but Grizel heard her. Our Father who art in heaven, oh, save us from danger, and bring us back safe to the chalet. The elder girl bent her head. Joey, let's say the light in our darkness, she whispered. Jo began at once, and the murmured sound of the words strengthened them. When they had finished, Grizel put her arm round Jo and held her close. I've tried, she said. You'll tell Madame, Joey? Yes, said Jo, but I don't think there'll be any need, Grizel. A long silence followed, and then Jo suddenly turned towards the elder girl. When you are right with God, death is just falling asleep to wake up with God, she said softly. I know, Joey. It's just the memory of Madame's words that is helping me now. And then they turned and faced what might be coming, calm with that thought. Suddenly a call of "Come" sounded through the passage, and they started to their feet and bolted along the glow. Suddenly they came on the great salt cave, which had so filled Cornelia with wonder some hours since. The torches Herr Arnulfi had lit were beginning to die, but there was still enough light for them to see the glistening crystals, and Joe uttered an exclamation of admiration in the center of the cave. Before a huge pile, Herr von Gluck was kneeling beside a dark heap. He seemed to be laying something white over part of it. Even as they looked, he crossed himself and bent his head. A horrible fear that it was Cornelia and that she was dead came to Joe, and she swayed against Griselle, who caught her. No, Joey, it's too big, cried the elder girl. It must be the lunatic. Friedel von Gluck, his brief prayer for the repose of the poor lost soul ended, rose to his feet. It is safe now, he said gravely. He died in my arms just before I called you. He says that the girl ran down the path that led to the other caves. She is somewhere down there, and I am going to find her. Will you be afraid to stay here while I seek for her? I will not be long. He said he thought he heard her stumble, but he fell himself and broke his leg in falling, or he would have gone to her. He struck his own head, and the double shock is what has killed him. He is very old, and I gather that his heart was not right. His sense had come back at the last, and he was able to tell me so much. Will you stay here while I bring the other little one? You might say a prayer for the repose of his soul. Griselle nodded. Yes, we will stay. Go quickly and get Cornelia, please. Come, Joey. We will go over there to those skins and wait. She led Joey to the heap of steer skins, which Cornelia had lain on, and made her lie down. Herr von Gluck saw that they were all right and went off on his final quest. Griselle held Joey close. Poor old thing, said the younger girl. I'm glad he is dead, Griselle. So am I, said Griselle. Then she added softly, he has fallen asleep to wake with God. They lay there quietly, and presently both fell asleep. Friedel found them like that when he came back to the salt cave, carrying Cornelia, who was now in a heavy stupor. He did not wake them, but he laid the other girl down beside them and proceeded to bind up the nasty cut on her forehead. After scraping some salt from one of the pillars and rubbing it in, it was Spartan treatment, but the best antiseptic he had on hand. The smarting of the salt on the open wound brought Cornelia to her senses, and she sat up with a low cry which awakened the two others. Oh, where are we? She wailed. What has happened? And oh, my head, it does hurt so. It's all right, Cornelia, said Joe soothingly. You're quite safe, and we're here with you. You must have banged your head a bit. But the madman, cried Cornelia. Oh, he'll come and kill us all. Friedel pointed to the still figure with the handkerchief over his face. He will never hurt anyone again, she said gently. He's dead. And then took off his coat and gave it to Griselle. Her clothes are damp. We must get her back to a dry place. Just as he was about to lift her, they heard the tread of many feet and sound of many voices. Light showed at the entrance from the cave, and a throng of people poured into the cave. Mademoiselle was there, and Miss Maynard and Miss Durant, good Herr Braun from the Kronprinz Karl, Dr. Jem, Herr August, and Joey rubbed her eyes in amazement. But it really was Herr Ansrel, looking more like a shaggy bear than ever with his long hair all tangled and untidy. There was also a big man who seemed to be vaguely familiar, and 2 or 3 others who were armed with ropes and pickaxes. But she heeded none of them. Like a flash she had run across the floor and was in her brother-in-law's arms. Jim, is Madge all right? She doesn't know. he caught her to him. Joe, thank God, thank God. No, she doesn't know. We're all here, went on Joey. Only Cornelia has hurt her head. Herr Friedel has tied it up. Jem set her down and hurried across to the little group. Then Joey found herself seized by a weeping mademoiselle who kissed her all over her face, rather to the young lady's disgust, and called her chérie, till unsentimental Joe simply didn't know where to look. It was Grizel's turn after that, and while Miss Maynard helped the doctor to bandage Cornelia rather more scientifically than Herr von Gluck had done it, the two girls were passed around among the company and made to tell their story. Then the big man grabbed Joey, just as if I was a pickpocket, grumbled Joe later on, and demanded whether they knew where was the road to the other caves. Friedel knows, returned the young lady, dropping all formalities. You'd better ask him. What? Young Friedel here? Roared the big man. He let Joe go, and the next moment she saw him pouncing on Wanda's betrothed and pouring out a perfect flood of questions. By this time, Dr. Jim had finished his work, and Miss Maynard was rolling Cornelia in a big shawl she had brought with her. Come, said the doctor, lifting up the bundle. We must get her back now. But I will stay, roared the big man. I am assured that we have the way, and I doubt not but that we shall make some marvelous discoveries here. He turned to the man with the rope and pickaxe, who had been standing to one side looking on. Come, you. We go forward now. Do not wait for me, Herr Doctor. Take that imp of a child home with those others too. You may look for me some time on the morrow. With that he plunged down the path where Friedel had found Cornelia, and the man following him, and was soon lost to sight. Jem laughed as he turned to the other entrance. I suppose we must leave him to his discoveries. These children would be good to go to bed as soon as possible. If I know Herr Professor von der Witt, no power on earth will turn him back now when he knows the caves must be near. So that was who it was. Then Herr Braun, approaching them, and with a pardon, picked up Joey in his arms and strode off in the wake of the doctor, leaving Herr August to treat Grizel in precisely similar manner, and the rest trooped after them, and they were carried in safety up the passage and across the bush-grown turf till they came to the road, where the path led to the Tarn Pass, where they found 3 motors awaiting them. They were all bundled in, and then they set off. It was daylight by this time, and the sun was shining when Joey and Grizel, after a good meal, were finally tucked up in bed in their cubicles and left to sleep off the effects of their latest escape. Chapter 22. 3 Cheers for Grizel. I hate end of term when it's the summer term. Thus Joey said viciously. Grizel, to whom she was speaking, looked at her seriously. It's worse when it's your last term, Joe. And don't say anything to make it worse, my lamb. I will not make a sentimental silly of myself, but I can't answer for the consequence if you rub things in. Joe cleared her throat. Righto. Oh, there's Rosa with David. Come on and see him. She turned and raced across the grass to where Rosa Paffin was wheeling Master David Russell along in his white pram. Joey came up panting, for the day was hot and hung over the pram, and made cooing noises to her small nephew, who lay looking at her with bland indifference, though when she slipped a finger into his dimpled paw, he gripped tightly. Isn't he darling? Said his adoring aunt. Joey, little chap, replied Grizel, peeping at him over her shoulder. He's going to be awfully like Madame Joey. Yes, isn't he? I think he's rather like young Rix, too, replied Jo. Her brother had brought his family to the Ternsee 3 weeks ago, and the entire school had gone in for a course of baby worship. Mrs. Russell had come down with her small son to join them in the chalet Dick had taken for 3 months, and the girls had reveled in having their dear beloved madam so near. Peggy and Rix were delightful small people, full of original sin. Baby Bridget proved to be the image of Dick. To quote Joey, and little David was declared to beat them all by every girl in the school. After that eventful night when they had rescued Cornelia, the term had gone on fairly evenly. Cornelia had had a sharp attack of rheumatic fever as the result of lying in a damp place for many hours, but she was a tough little mortal and had come through it all right. The next event of importance had been Grizel's wedding, which had taken place in Innsbruck. The entire school had gone down for it and had a remarkably good time. Then, on his mother's birthday, David's christening feast had been the treat for this holiday. Finally, Wanda and Herr Hauptmann Friedel von Gluck had been wedded a week ago, and were now enjoying their honeymoon at Partenkirchen in the Mattelwald. The big event of the term, however, was the opening up of the caves, which proved to be wonderful beyond expectations. Herr von der Witt had found the passage led right down to the first, which had the most marvelous stalactites formation, and thence to 3 others. In the last one were discovered relics of what must have formerly been a great city. Pavements and fragments of wall, all encrusted with lime, were there. Excavations were going on, and more was going to be found each day. Joe was wildly excited about it all, for it proved that the legend of the lake's origin was no legend, but statement of fact. Experts who had come to see the place agreed that the lake must have risen quite suddenly and overwhelmed the city, though not, perhaps, quite as awfully as the old story said. "It's been a full term," said Joe, when they at last turned away from the pram and strolled on up to the chalet. "What with the things and another, I think it's been the fullest we've ever had." "We've managed to crowd a good deal in," agreed Grizel. "I say, there's the bell for meal. Come on." They hurried in to take their place at the table, for there was to be a garden party that afternoon, and no one had much time to spare. Grizel took her place at the head of the junior table for the last time, and Joe went off to her own seat, where her beloved friend, the little crown prince of Balsornia, was waiting for her. Princess Elisaveta had gone to Vienna for Wanda's wedding, and then had come back to the school for the last week of the term, to wait for her dear Joe, who was to spend the summer holidays with her. She had come in to lessons, and had lived with the girls just as she had done 2 terms ago, when she had been one of themselves, and had delighted them all by vowing that it was a relief to be at school again. "Hurry up, Joey," she said now. "We've got to dress yet, you know." "I should think so," retorted Joe, with a glance at the crumpled frock the princess was wearing. "You look as if you had been put to bed in that cotton thing you've got on." "Well, you look as if you've been washing the floors in yours," returned the princess. "More potatoes, please, Simone." Mrs. Russell, in her old place at the head of the staff table, glanced down to the room with a smile. "How excited they all are. Just listen to Evandine screeching." "A good many of the others are doing their best to rival her," laughed Miss Maynard. "It must sound like a parrot house to everyone passing." "Oh, well, it's the end of the term," said Miss Carthow tolerantly. "You've got to allow for that." "Oh, I don't mind," said Miss Maynard, assuring her. "I'm so thrilled about going home, I don't really mind what they are doing today." "I also," put in Mademoiselle, "I know that our girls will never forget that they are of the Chalet School and must not disgrace it, so I do not trouble if they are excited." "Yes, even Cornelia seems to have learned that lesson," agreed Miss Maynard, with a glance to where the young person was sitting. "Such manners then she has been having, and still rather pale, but evidently very happy, and thoroughly one of them." "I think we've all finished," said Miss Wilson at that moment. Madge Russell nodded and said grace, and then the girls were dismissed to their rooms to change into their prettiest frocks and make themselves as dainty as possible. There was a great deal of chatter as they changed, for many of them would be going home with parents at the end of the afternoon, and all had much to say about the holidays. "Be sure you let us have your Florence address," Grizel said Gertrude, in the prefect's dormitory. "You must write to us every week and let us know what you are doing. And you must all write to me, said the head girl as she rapidly put a gloss on her short curls. I shall be coming to Innsbruck for Bernhilda's wedding in December, you know, and I shall hope to see most of you then. And we will all come here for Mademoiselle's birthday next year, said Rosalie, who was going home to England, where her father had obtained a living in Kent. You couldn't miss that. Rather not. Even Miss Curthow is coming for that, if she possibly can, put in Mary, who was looking forward to being head girl next term, and was wondering if she would ever be so good as any one of the four who had preceded her. Grizel threw down her brush. Hurry up, you people, she said, as she emerged and began shaking the folds of her dress into place. We mustn't be late. They made haste, and presently they were all out in the flower garden, where most of the middles were all ready. Madge Russell, looking at them as they wandered about, sighed to herself. This term's outgoings would be large, and many of her own girls would have left them. The school would be flourishing, she felt sure. They were firmly established, and she knew that the vacant places were already more than filled, for the fame of the school was spreading. But after this, it would not be her school as it had been. Perhaps it was as well, for her hands were full as it was, and would probably grow fuller as the years went on. Joey would have only another year at the school, for she was going till Belsornia when she was 17, as lady-in-waiting to the princess. Her education would be continued there by masters and governesses with Elisaveta, but she would cease to be a schoolgirl. After that, no one knew what the future held for her. Madge hoped that her writing gifts would bring her something. That was all she would think of at present. She finished her dressing and went down to join her girls, looking scarcely older than they did. In her dainty white frock and big shady hat, the first guests began to arrive shortly after this, and the afternoon was full and very busy. Dick and his wife and babies were there, of course, and so were Gisela and her husband. Wanda and Friedel had come from Partenkirchen for 2 days, so as not to miss this event, and all the old friends were there, as well as some new ones, among whom was Herr van der Witt, highly delighted with everything and everybody. The girls gave a concert in the garden and sang some of the lovely old madrigals that Mr. Denny revelled in. Margia and Grizel both played, and Frida enchanted everyone by her lovely harp solo. Joey sang 2 folk songs, and, of course, they showed some of the folk dances, and Herr van der Witt was actually heard to say that it was a very pretty sight. As his 2 ideas in life were fresh air and geology, they all felt that this was a great compliment. Then café was served, and the girls acting as waitresses, and after that people began to move homeward in the playing fields. The girls clustered together for a last speech from their head girl. Grizel looked round them all. You are dear, she began, uncertainly, and then she stopped. She felt that if she went on she would break down. Joey guessed that she was feeling so and sprang into the breach. 3 cheers for Grizel, one of the best head girls the school has ever had, she yelled at the top of her voice, and they were given with vim and made those of the guests who still remained literally jump, and sent Grizel flying to a place of refuge before she should disgrace herself in front of them all by crying. Jo found her later, looking rather red about the eyes, but very happy. Good for you, Grizel, she said. Grizel looked round at the lovely lake with the huge mountains towering all around it, the flower garden quiet now that all the guests were gone, the chalet where she had spent 4 happy years, fondly at the girl who had stood by her through so much. It's been a good time, Joey, she said. All my life I shall remember how much I owe you and Madame and the Chalet School. The end. Hope you've enjoyed this book. And next Wednesday, I'm going to start a new one. So check in for that. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.